Good evening. We've now got Cookie Dough 3.0, which is seriously exciting. However, what I thought you might like to have is a few tips on how to convert your own recipes. So we did do a class a couple of months ago on this, but I had to take the recording down because I got it up too early. And in fact, I had a couple of bits of information in there, which if you were watching, I want to correct. So what I had in there was, I thought that if you purchased a recipe from, say, Skinny Mixers or Quirky Cooking or something like that, you could upload that to Cookie Dough. In fact, our copyright rules here and laws here in Australia prevent you from doing that. So just please ignore everything we said about that, because I think we said it a few times. So the only things you can actually upload to Cookie Dough are recipes from the recipe community, so the Thermomix recipe community. Have a look at that online, just Google it. Recipes from Cookie Dough. So, you know, there might be some Cookie Dough recipes that you love, but you tweak them every single time. So you can upload that into your created recipes section and you can put your changes in. So say if you, I mean, I remember this one, it's super easy, but when I'm making the chunky bolognese, I use up to 2 kilos of mince, but I put it in the Varoma rather than 700 kilos of mince, 700 grams of mince in the simmering basket. So I could just import that and change that, but I know it, so I'm not going to do it for that recipe. But there may be other recipes that you have a couple of little tweaks. You think, yeah, actually, I want to put those in there, so I'm always cooking it the same way without having to think about it and remember it. The other way that the other sort of recipe you can put in there is one that's like a family heirloom or a friend's given you. So an age-old recipe that you've had forever, or maybe not forever, but, you know, you've had it for a while. You know, it may be a friend's recipe. It may be something that your mum's passed on to you or whatever. And you can convert that to Thermomix. So none of the blog stuff, none of the things that you already paid for, because once the recipe goes up there, it does become a property of Forwerk. And at some point, even though we can't share those recipes at the moment, we may be able to in the future. And of course, if someone's, you know, got a book and you've put all their recipes up on Cookie Dough, it's not really very fair. So just being mindful of that. Now, let's move on. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you some slides for when we did this last class. Okay, so let's start. So that, of course, is just an example of a very old, well, it doesn't look like a very worn recipe book, but an old recipe book. It's the sort of thing you collect your recipes in. I've got a seriously old one, which I worked out was about 40 years old. All right, so a few safety things to begin with. Never go over the maximum line of the bowl or the simmering basket. Okay, that's really important. If including a basic high heat recipe, follow it exactly. So, you know, with high heat, if you've got the TM6, it goes up to 160 degrees. Things like your onions, it won't work if your onions are chopped. So it's got to be in wedges. You can chop your onions later or don't use the high heat. All right, but do follow it exactly. Don't overload the Thermomix weight-wise. So it is a maximum of 6 kilos in your Thermomix bowl. And make sure the hole in the mixing bowl lid is not obstructed by food in the simmering basket. So you know how the simmering basket sits just underneath the lid, and the MC's there just over the hole. So just make sure that it's not obstructed. If that ever does happen to you, hit the silver button, stop your Thermomix, and remove it. Okay. Now, a few golden rules. First of all, dry to wet. The very, very, very first thing you should always do, particularly when you're converting, and often when I'm actually doing a Cookie Dough recipe, is always read the recipe first. So you may have a recipe that does require almond meal in it. So for example, last night I made the creamy coconut chicken curry with cauliflower rice, and that has a little bit of 20 grams of almond meal in it to help thicken the sauce. Now I know about that, because I read ahead and I make that before I make the curry. Otherwise, I'm going to have to chuck the curry out, or unless I've got a second bowl, of course, and make my almond meal. So much better to do that first, put it in a separate bowl, and then you can add it in when you need to. The little turbo symbol down here on the bottom right is just to remind me to tell you that if you do make a mistake and you get wet things in there, and then you've got to actually dry something and you've got to tip everything out, you wash your bowl, you dry your bowl, you pop it onto your onto the base, you turbo, and then you re-dry it, because you will find that more liquid will come off the blades when you turbo. So just to get a really, really dry bowl, turbo. Okay, but read the recipe first and always use dry ingredients to wet. Cold to hot. This is important for things like cheese. So if you think about, a pasta dish, you may want some Parmesan cheese with your pasta. You go and you make the whole dish, and then you realize, I haven't made the Parmesan cheese. Well, you've got a hot bowl, and your cheese is just going to melt. It's not going to chop as well. So just again, reading through the recipe, if you need to chop anything up, do it when the bowl is cold. You might have to put it into a separate bowl, or I know if I'm making like a chunky bolognese or something, I might have my cheese chopped in one bowl and then my chunky bolognese is being made in the other. So cold to hot, so you don't end up with melted things that you don't want melted. All in one. So with the Thermomix, you can, there's a lot of recipes that you can just chuck everything in. So think about a bechamel sauce. If you're cooking it on the stovetop, then you are wanting to, you need to make a roux. So you're going to melt your butter, you're going to stir in your flour, and then you're going to gradually add your milk in to make your sauce. In a Thermomix, you don't need to do that. You chuck everything in together. So just have a think and see if what you're making, if you can do it that way. Find a similar recipe, and this is the best way to actually move forwards when you're creating your own. Have a look through Cookie Do. Go, oh, actually, yeah, I remember there was a meatball recipe there. How did they do it? And basically follow the same steps, but have your own ingredients in, have your own flavorings, whatever it is you're doing. You might want, instead of doing a meatball, it might be a vegetarian nut ball or something like that. But just have a look, see how it's made, and then convert your recipe along the same lines. We had the lovely Rachel Gray with us when we did this class originally, and she was telling us her tips for converting baking recipes. So she's made a beautiful book, actually doing exactly what I was talking about before, about saving her mother's recipes. So her mum was, still is, she's around, and she was very involved with the Country Women's Association and won lots and lots of prizes for her baking. So Rachel wanted to keep all those recipes and has put them in a book. And there is a slide actually at the end of this that show you the book if you're interested. A lot of really great Aussie baking recipes. So some of them, I have to say, growing up in the UK, I didn't know, but there's some beautiful recipes in there. All right, so Rachel's tips for converting baking recipes. Best to use cold butter from the fridge. The Thermomix is a really powerful machine. And if your butter is warm or soft, it may well be that you're going to overbeat it in the Thermomix. Cream your butter and your caster sugar on speed 3. Which goes in with don't whip or mix too vigorously. So just take it gently, and you might have to do it for a bit longer. I'm pretty sure with one of her buttercreams, she did it for 3 or 4 minutes, but it was at that speed. You can cut out some steps like sifting your flour. So you can just chuck your flour into the Thermomix, and you don't need to sieve it like you do if you're doing things by hand. This is a really great tip. When adding sticky ingredients like dried fruit, you know how when you're trying to chop those up and they always end up sticking around the blades and everything like that? If you add a teaspoon of flour or icing sugar when you're chopping that, it just, you don't get that stickiness happening. And for finely grated zest, ensure that your citrus is fresh. Now, another little tip with that, I would suggest that if you're making a cake that has lemon and sugar in it, do the two at the same time. So you can mill your sugar and your zest at the same time. All right. All right, a few more little cooking tips. So sometimes less is more. Again, another example, last night I was making the cauliflower rice for this creamy coconut chicken curry. And instead of putting 700 grams of cauliflower in to make the rice, it works much better if you've got 2 lots of 350 grams. You're going to get a much more even chop. So if you've got the full 700 grams, it's going to be all tiny and almost, not pureed, but close to at the bottom near the blades, and the top you're going to have big chunks. So sometimes it is better to do it in 2 batches rather than 1 big batch. When chopping small amounts, you can insert the simmering basket to keep the contents of the bowl close to the blades. So you can see it's just reducing the volume of the bowl so that everything stays close to the blades. When doubling a recipe, increase your cooking time by 20%. Of course, when you're doubling, always make sure you're not going over the maximum line in your bowl. And when you're halving a recipe, you decrease your cooking by 20%. And again, if you're using high heat, you never halve the recipe. If you are going to whip egg whites, so you might have a lovely mousse that needs whipped egg whites, or you're making a pave or something like that, then you do need to do a vinegar wash of the bowl and the butterfly. All right, so the slightest bit of grease will stop your egg whites from whipping really well. You can also put them through the dishwasher. That will actually do the same sort of thing. Add ingredients to the simmering basket and the varoma according to their cooking time. So the things that take longest, you want to have in the simmering basket, and then going up into the 2 layers of the varoma. So you might have vegetables, you know, well, you might, often it's rice in the simmering basket, and then vegetables in the base of the varoma, and maybe fish or chicken in the top. All right. Rice cooked in the simmering basket generally needs to be speed 4. There is a particular recipe I always remember, and is the most delicious recipe, easy chicken satay, or satay chicken. It doesn't have the rice, when the rice is in there, it's not on speed 4 and it does not cook enough. So make sure you put your rice, when you're cooking rice in a recipe, use speed 4. And when you're steaming, make sure you leave some holes unobstructed to make sure the steam can circulate. So one of a good trick for that is just put your butterfly in the bottom of your varoma, or you can cross chopsticks, or you can cross knives or forks or something like that, and it just allows a little bit more air to, or not air, steam to circulate, so you get a better cook. All right, a general guide to temperature. So 37 to 55 degrees is for melting or warming gently. So I know in a couple of her cakes or slices that Rachel did with us, she actually melted the butter at 37 degrees. So chocolate and baby food are also really good at to warm up at those temperatures too. So remember, in the TM6 you do have a warm up mode. It's fantastic. So you can use it for baby food. I use it for soups. Put it up to 80 degrees. Put my soup in there. Walk away. Come back. 60 to 80 degrees. 80 degrees. Cooking gently. So ideal for your sauces. So your bechamel sauces. Those sorts of things. 80 to 95 degrees. Heating water or milk without boiling over. So I don't know if you've done like me in the past. Had meat in a pan on the stove and it's boiled over. Oh my goodness, what a mess. So just making sure you keep under the boiling point for those things. 100 degrees is great for cooking soups and stews or boiling your water. 105 to 115 degrees, sugar syrups. 120 degrees, sauteing your vegetables or your meat, and varoma temperature for steaming ingredients. Okay, so the difference between all the temperatures below varoma temperature is they're all on a thermostat. So they're going to go up to that temperature and click off. Varoma temperature means that you are getting a rolling board, so you're going to get constant steam for whatever you're steaming. All right, so we do have all these Thermomix modes. So they're all pretty self-explanatory there, but have a bit of an explore. You know, if you go into each of these modes on the TM6, there is a little eye at the top right-hand side, and that if you click on that, that will tell you all about that mode and how to use it. Now, a lot of these modes I do just use in guided cooking, but if you're converting your own recipes, you might want to use some of them. Okay, so obviously your dough mode, the thicken, the rice cooker, those sorts of things. And you may not be able to put them in at the moment, but just have a think about them and how you would use them anyway. And where can you find out more? Well, if you have a TM6, you have recipe conversion on pages 22 to 23, chopping functions page 309, and all about steaming on 317. So when the chopping ones, in all these books, it will tell you how long it takes to grate or to mince or to mill a certain ingredient and a certain weight of that ingredient. So it's fantastic for that. With the steaming, it goes through the steaming basics. So it is, you do need to have 500 mils of water or a sauce or whatever you're using, or a stock in there before you start steaming. And that is for 30 minutes. And you steam varoma temperature at speed 1, the time that's required for that particular ingredient. Okay, anything over 30 minutes, for every extra 15 minutes, you increase the time, sorry, increase the mils by 250 mils or grams. Okay, your TM5 basic cookbook, there are your pages on there, your TM31 basic cookbook, and I do have cheat sheets. So if anybody wants them, I'm not sure if they're in my group, but if anybody wants them, you just have to email me and I'll send them out to you. Okay, and lastly, this is just a little plug for Rachel. So Rachel's book is amazing. She's got beautiful recipes in there. And if you're after traditional baking, then it's a great place to go. And she has, it's available in Thermomix, but if you just Google Rachel Gray, so she is Rachel Gray, it'll come up with her Square site as well, so you can go directly to her. Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing. All right, so I hope that's helpful. It's getting dark in here now. That's sort of part one. And I will, at another time, I will do a little bit of recording on how you upload the recipes to Cookie-Doo, how you pop them in, and how you can convert the Cookie-Doo recipes. Okay, so hope that's helpful, and I will see you soon. Thanks, bye.